Hey, happy Saturday, everyone. Our topic today is the forgiveness of God. That's a topic we all need to think about, right? The verse is Ephesians 1:7, and it says, "In him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins in accordance with the riches of God's grace." So as we think about this verse, it's going to pick up where we left off yesterday. Chambers shared yesterday that when we think of the forgiveness of God, or the love of God particularly, we need to have in mind the cross of Calvary, because that's where we see the love of God manifested. So he starts off today saying, "Beware of the pleasant view of the fatherhood of God." And that is that God is so kind and loving that he will, of course, forgive us. So many people assume God will just forgive because he's loving. As Chambers says here, that thought based solely on emotion cannot be found anywhere in the New Testament. So when we're talking about the love of God or forgiveness of God, it's in an act. It's in a plan that he had to carry through to redeem fallen humanity. It's not just like an emotive feeling of, oh, I feel so sorry for these people. I know they didn't worship me or accept my son or go to church or be baptized or ask for forgiveness or rely on my grace to be redeemed. But I feel bad for them, so I'm going to take them to heaven. If he could have done that, right, he wouldn't have had to send Christ. So it nullifies the cross if he just does it nilly-willy, so to speak. He'll go on to say this: "Forgiveness is the divine miracle of grace. The cost to God was the cross of Christ. To forgive sin while remaining a holy God, this price had to be paid. Never accept a view of the fatherhood of God if it blots out the atonement. The revealed truth of God is that without the atonement, he cannot forgive. He would contradict his nature if he did. The only way we can be forgiven is by being brought back to God through the atonement of the cross. God's forgiveness is possible only in the realm of the supernatural." And so again, to point us to the cross and the why. God is just. He has to be loving and merciful or gracious, or all these things we think about God. But at the core of his being, he cannot break his own law, right? He is bound by himself, by his nature. He cannot act contrary to his nature. So if he's holy, if he's just, if he's righteous, he cannot act holy or contrary to that holiness, to that righteousness, to that justice. Last paragraph, Chambers says, "Compared with the miracle of the forgiveness of sin, the experience of sanctification is small. Sanctification is simply the wonderful expression or evidence of the forgiveness of sins in a human life. But the thing that awakens the deepest fountain of gratitude in a human being is that God has forgiven his sin. Paul never got away from this. Once you realize all that it cost God to forgive you, you will be held in a vice, constrained by the love of God." That's a beautiful picture. It made me really think, wow, what does that mean, right? To be constrained in a vice with the love of God. When we think of a vice, we think of something pressure, something not loving, something not caring, right? But he pictures here that once we understand what God had to do to redeem us, the cross, Calvary, the punishment of his own son, placing our sin on his son so that he can redeem us, then he begins to work in us and sanctify us. And as Chambers says here, though, that this sanctification is really just an outward expression of our gratitude, that we understand what God did for us. So we begin to live holy lives. We begin to live lives that want to honor and glorify him versus lives of selfishness and living worldly. But once we do that, we understand that God keeps us and holds us in his love, that we may walk in that newness of life, as he shared yesterday. And so I think the last 2 days kind of tie together. Hopefully it ties together for you of seeing this love of God. And as we understand the love of God being in Christ, also understanding now that our duty is to be thankful. We got Thanksgiving coming up, right? To be thankful to God for what he's done for us. So we trust and obey him daily. We'll see you guys Monday. Have a blessed Lord's Day tomorrow.